Okay, good evening, everyone. I'd like to welcome participants to the joint hybrid planning board meeting of February 12th. Call to order, Ms. Creighton.
Here.
Ms. Delicio. Foley. Mr. Only. Here. Ms. Philbrick.
Here.
Ms. Tenney is not here, so we've got 1, 2, 3, 4. The quorum. But we have a quorum tonight. I'd like to remind all board members, guests asked to be recognized by the chair if you wish to speak, and this meeting is being recorded. First item on the agenda is acknowledgement or receipt of correspondence. And Gail has noted Ms. Iavoni, 126 and 21, Essex ZBA, and Jonathan Murray's response to Mark Resnick. That's correspondence. At this time, I would open any comments from the public of items that are not on the agenda with a limited amount of time. Would anyone from the public like to speak to the board? Hearing none. I'd like to move on to the next. First item on the agenda is back to rules and regulations, driveway openings, final application form. So I posted in your packet a revised application form. I was supposed to get some comments from Ms. Foley, but I haven't seen any yet, and hoping that she might come soon. I would like to just defer this unless people have comments until she gets here. Laura.
I don't have new comments, but aren't her comments in the document? When I looked online at the,
There were
Word
comments from
documents
a
on the-
previous one, and then we decided
Oh,
to
those were
make one
previous.
application for both the special and the
got
DPW.
it. Okay,
So
maybe those are old comments.
I think it's ready to go, but I will, if you don't mind, I'll postpone this till a little later on. Otherwise, we'll discuss it later on. The next item on this rules and regulations would be for Springtown meeting. Sarah reminded us that we need to do some de minimis amendments to the general bylaw section. That this is what we would be bringing forward to town meeting, and
I'm having
you have
trouble
any
signing
comment?
on, so I'll just summarize. So I looked, I thought that we had talked through our discussion of the regulation about a couple of changes to the general bylaw that had come up in our discussion. The first was, how do we deal with commercial driveways? The second is, how do we deal with more than one entrance? And the third was whether the width for residential at 12 feet with a 5 foot flare divided on either side was too small. So let me put the width aside for a minute. When we were doing the regulations, we said, what about commercial, and what if we were under the impression that if it was greater than 12 feet and more than one entrance, that we could not, it was just not allowed. But when you actually read the general bylaws, it says the owner must submit a driveway entrance application. Said application should be subject to regulations developed by the planning board and be modified from time to time. Any curb cuts that do not comply with the criteria defined therein, which would be the number, the width, or in the opinion of DPW should require a special review, may be permitted if special permit is granted by the planning board. So what we did is we said anything that didn't comply above comes to the planning board. So I think that was our intent at the time, and that our read or our understanding through Jonathan's comments on the regulations that it was hard and fast, you have this or not, was not a full read of the general bylaw. That's my lay person's, so maybe I'll double check it, have, that everybody can, I'll send it out and everybody can decide if I'm accurate or not, but I think my read is that we did have a provision, and so that's the first issue. The second issue was, what about commercial? And the general bylaw is silent about commercial. The only restrictions for 12 feet with a 5-foot flare and 1 driveway is only for residential. It says driveway with driveway entrances should be located to an website. Somewhere it said residential, I believe. So I'm pretty sure it just said it was for residential. I go back to
I
double.
think it did say
Yeah, for
that.
residential, and then, so given that so that commercial is not limited by those restrictions. So I think we are okay on that one. Can you go back and read the general bylaw, which I can't open right now because I can't get on the web.
Mr. Olin?
So, my understanding is that if a commercial driveway is serving a commercial business that requires 5 or more spaces, there would be site plan review,
So,
in which case we could approve whatever we thought was reasonable.
right. Right, and second, however, we actually, in the general bylaw, and I would suggest if we're gonna make modifications, that we take it out. We have a sentence that says this permit shall be separate and in addition to any required site plan review and to any building permit.
Hmm.
So I would suggest that we actually say something like site plan review that includes a new or altered driveway entrance shall take the place of review by DPW. If we're gonna make
Ms. Penny?
changes, yeah.
I'm looking, I think I'm looking for the same clause that you were referencing, Sarah, about
The residential.
residential. So if you're in section 5, criteria for driveway entrances, paragraph C, where it talks about the width, and then it says, see the following diagram, last sentence of that paragraph. So, see the following diagram, single width residential driveway standard.
Yeah, that's in the regulations, correct.
Right.
Yeah, and
So
I'm
that's-
reading the general bylaw, because that would be what we would amend.
Yeah, I think I was just
Yeah, clarifying that it is only for
verifying
residential.
that it was only for residential.
Yeah. So I think the only issue that in my mind is really important, really material, important as I read it, is that this width of a minimum of 8 feet and a maximum of 12 feet width with a combined with a driveway flare area of 5 feet divided on either side of the driveway. So before the meeting started, I was saying I took a walk today and I have a 3-foot pace and I paced out 20 driveways. And then I went on Map Geo and I measured another 20 driveways from, and I could find 1, maybe now 2, because I asked Chris and Sue to measure their driveway width that were under 12, so 2 under 12 feet. It is and I also looked at historic driveways that have, have pillars that have been in Manchester for decades and decades. I looked at little lanes. I also on Map Geo went to Forest Street, Loading Place Road, and Old Essex Road, sort of less traveled roads and Hickory Hill to see, and that, I assume Hickory Hill was probably a subdivision back in the days. So it probably received some sort of site plan review. And those driveways, using Map Geo, the little tool to measure, were 18, 19 feet. So I think for right now, what I would say is, I haven't talked to Nate, but I think that's the next step. And I would encourage everybody to, in the next 2 weeks, walk around town and assess, pace out. 4 paces is 12 feet. 4 long paces is 12 feet. And see if 12 feet feels adequate. And secondly, what the general bylaw says, if it's not 12, if it's over 12 feet, it has to come back to us. And so our intent with this review was to have the DPW use their engineering judgment for this issue. And so I think if a strict read of this basically says that every driveway is gonna come back to us, which I think we are trying to not have happen for two reasons. One is burden for us, and two, burden for homeowners. And just in terms of speed and a special permit.
So, I have a question, sir. So when you're measuring, do you measure at the street?
Well, that would be with the flare.
Yeah, so
So
with the flare, 17 feet.
yours is,
No, I mean,
yes,
That's what the law.
that's what it's allowed.
yeah, but even still, very few, at least with, I'm not doing, I didn't have a tape measure, I was
Okay.
pacing them. And so I just, I think at this point, I would ask everybody to measure a 3-foot pace and go out and pace the driveways that, and maybe the other question is, do we want to reduce driveway size from what is essentially, as my read is, customary throughout town?
Laura?
I might have missed the beginning of this discussion, so I'm not sure how it came up, but I think that it's probably worth a conversation with Chuck and Nate about what's a good standard practice, because every time we widen a curb cut, we also make life worse for pedestrians.
Right.
And bicyclists, and the wider the curb cut, the safer it is, and the more likelihood we are also increasing impervious at the same time. This diagram's been we didn't invent this diagram, it's been in the package for a long time, so I don't think we're making something new here. And I think that 17-foot flare is pretty adequate. I don't dispute that you may know your own taste, but I don't encourage all of us to go out and kind of estimate it.
Right,
I think it's a measurement.
Yeah,
Right.
right.
And so again, I don't know why it came up, but I think just to check in with Chuck about what's reasonable. A 12-foot, 9 feet is the width of the travel lane typically. And so 12 feet is, kind of approaching a travel lane and a half. There might be a reason to
Yeah,
go larger.
I'm not sure
but-
it's an urgent matter.
Yeah,
But it's my observation that it is inconsistent with most driveway width. I agree with you, all of the goals of safety and width, but I also, our other goals were to try to leave it to Chuck and Nate, and a strict read of this doesn't do that.
So just to sum up, you think we're okay on commercial, not to
Yes.
bring that to
Yeah.
town meeting, but to bring the width issue based on.
I'd like everybody to think a little bit about it and measure your own driveway. And measure 4 or 5 others that are, just to kind of see it on the ground.
yeah. Sorry, Nate.
Yes.
Just to finish, I think that not everyone is going to understand the difference between the potential flare of 17
Mhm.
feet that's at the intersection with the street versus the back of the right of way, which is 12.
So the diagram
So-
helps.
So the diagram helps, but I don't think everyone walking around would necessarily be able to distinguish where that mark is. So I agree, there's probably a lot of variation, and you might have had 2 old stone pillars on an old house on what used to be a gravel driveway, and now it's been paved to the extent it can be paved, right? So things get wider out of convenience. So I just caution us a little bit before we take the guardrails off something that's been on the books for a long time. I'll stop.
Just one observation in our town that has grown up over 400 years. The width of streets vary dramatically,
Mhm.
and they're not uniform. And so it seems to me that on the narrower streets, we actually need to be a little bit more lenient with the room of turning in and out, even though there are many pedestrians and cyclists on those streets. Just negotiating them is more difficult than trying to make it.
Which is why we want
Right.
Chuck, sorry
Yeah,
to Chuck and Nate
exactly.
to have some, little, I guess I feel like they should have more,
Yes.
more, authority to also to narrow things, to ask to narrow them down for sure, but also for turning radius. so forth. So, that's where we are with that,
All right.
and,
Any other amendments you see with the general bylaw?
not on
besides
that. Thank you.
All right, thank you.
I guess if we, sorry, just to clarify, if we were to go at it, I would suggest that we remove the requirement that an applicant have a DPW review and a site plan review. It seems to me that that's redundant. But, or maybe we could, for example, for the 2 site plan reviews we have in front of us, fold it into that our site plan process, and certainly we can do that. We could have the DPW review the site plan and call it. But I don't think it's worth amending the bylaw for that. So,
Okay,
all right, that's it.
Okay, and then on the special permit, site plan review and hiring of consultants, any movement on that?
I haven't done, we're gonna try to get together. We haven't.
I'll skip priorities, on Slowly and Mr. Lucio aren't with us. MBTA community.
Oh, Ron. While you're on priorities, could we just have a chance to comment on this?
On priorities.
Right, on priority, so 2 were added, and I know those 2 members are not here, but further down on the agenda, we've got senior housing, so if we're talking about priorities, I would suggest we add that one. Since we've got people diligently working on it.
Well,
not as
we
diligent.
paused,
Well, okay,
but you're right, it should be on the list.
I think there are lots of things that are already on our plate, so I'm not suggesting we need to accelerate these, given some other things that are happening, but if those are other priorities.
Yeah, at least let's get them
On the
out
list.
there. I don't think we have time,
I agree.
certainly not this spring town meeting and probably not this year, but we want to keep the fire going on those items. Okay, well, maybe I'll just take out of order while, before we get to the MBTA, why don't we start with cell signaling since you're here? Yeah, as well. So, we received the box of materials a couple of weeks ago and the thumb drive, thank you. And then, the planning board was tasked with, looking over the application and coming up with, anything they thought was missing. And, or had questions on items in the documents. So I think I will go first.
Okay. Chairman's priority, prerogative.
On the missing items, was there a Concom order of conditions? And I didn't see it in there.
It's being, we're applying to Conservation Commission this week.
So it hasn't been,
So we're running past, so we'll be seeing you and the Conservation Commission at the same time. Conservation won't allow us to be heard until we've submitted the planning board.
gotcha. One of the comments from the state, DEP cannot provide comments to the ENF insufficient. Submitted to into MIPA. Is that what they were saying? They couldn't provide comments to the ENF?
Perhaps because the MIPA file had been closed. I think the ENF was accepted
It was
by the state, so.
Okay. Stormwater report, I didn't see
In
that
there.
in there.
Yes, it's in there.
It is in
It's
there.
huge.
It's huge.
Okay.
I took down.
The ENF did not describe the quality of wastewater or need for pretreatment. That's something,
This is your wastewater or stormwater?
wastewater.
So the ENF was previously applied for and closed out prior to the start of the planning board.
So, and it was sort of 6, 8, 10 months ago, but I'd be shocked if it didn't describe that we were gonna connect to the Manchester.
But the quality of the, does it need to be pre-treated because of the lab? Was there any concerns over what was
cell signaling takes, they have a very modest requirement towards pre-treating. The treatment, they have a tanks and tanks. So it's like, they do this in Beverly and, in Beverly, they fly with the.
So there was just a comment in the documentation that wasn't provided to them, so that's, what I know.
I'm sorry, who's offering the comments? These planning board members offering the comments?
Yes,
Okay.
Can I just?
yes,
I think our intent was to look through the documents, familiarize ourselves with them and see if we were missing any obvious things. It doesn't mean that you're I think, at least I haven't read through everything to say it's complete, but there are a few things that maybe are missing, so you can get them to us to make it easier for us to review things, and so we don't hold you up saying in 5 weeks, oh, what about the effluent from? So I think that's,
With respect to the effluent,
Yeah.
if that becomes an issue that requires discussion, we have records from operation in Beverly with the Sub-Essex Sewerage District. And so we can provide the
I think
track
that
record.
would be.
yeah, it was just flagged by the state, so I was just wondering if that has been dealt with. Okay, so I'll go around the board, who's next? Laura.
I'm still working my way through the comprehensive packet, so thank you for
Would it be better
the.
if we came up?
Oh, yeah,
Oh, yeah,
I'm kind of
join
leaning.
us.
Sure.
We're trying to hide.
You want to introduce yourselves to the audience?
I'm Peter Bordeaux, I'm a development consultant working with cell signaling.
Mike Connor, civil engineer for Hancock Associates.
Mark Lowski, lawyer.
So thanks, Ron. My comments are brief because I am still working my way through the packet and it's comprehensive. So I am noticing in our schedule that we have traffic on as one evening's topic. And in I think the state transportation's letter, they passed along some comments from Manchester Bike and Ped. Just with a reference to the broader network of pedestrian and bike improvements. So I'm wondering if that could be also the subject of the traffic meeting or of a meeting. So that we're thinking not just about vehicular traffic, but bike and ped as well.
Rather than 10, that was my thought.
Okay,
I'm
great.
gonna prove that.
Yeah, great. And that's it for me for now.
So I have general comments, because I'm still working my way through this. So this is the first site plan review we've done with our new zoning bylaw. And that made it kind of interesting because I learned a bunch of things trying to figure out what was submitted and what was missing, because they didn't match, it was a very comprehensive package, but some things would be in one document, some in another, and so I ended up making a little checklist here and put A's and B's and C's, and they were just all over the place. So what I'm wondering, it might help us if you were to do that for us and you were to go through the checklist and say, this is this document that answers this thing. This is a document answers that thing. And then there are criteria that we have to take into account when we make our decision. And it would be great to have you tell us how you're meeting those criteria so we can say yes or no, or our consultants can say yes or no. And finally, we have these design standards, performance standards. And again, there was a whole lighting cut thing here, and there was, it was just all over the place. So if you could go through and say, go through each of the standards and say lighting, this is where you can find it. And for noise, here's the stuff about noise. Some of the things are clearly not relevant. And if you were to say neighborhood concerns, that's not relevant because chipmunks can't speak.
Well, I beg to differ across the highway.
So excuse me.
Yeah, okay.
But it would just be very helpful to us if it were your submission corresponded to what we're looking for.
And as you know, your performance standards give you a fair amount of discretion as to what you can waive, what you can require, depending on the nature of the project.
Absolutely.
So-
And we'd be intending to waive a bunch of them, I'm sure.
Right. We'll put together an index for you.
Yeah, that'd be great.
Referencing, the sections of
6.3.
The materials that we filed.
And I think when we do
Yeah.
regulations, I think this should be part of
Yeah,
the
yeah.
regulations.
No, I think it's a good, I actually printed out the 6.3 and went through it as well. So,
We can do that.
okay, that's a great suggestion.
Sarah?
I had a couple, comments. The half scale or quarter scale sheets are great, but do we have a, full scale set of plans so that when we want to actually, is there one, at least one full set, full
Requested
scale?
One, I'm not sure.
Just, I think that we should have, I'm sure Chuck and Nate and some of the consultants will probably use it electronically. I mean, I don't know, or maybe we can just use the thumb drive to,
I have requested one, so.
I think the public one full set would be, because the application is.
One was
It
delivered.
was delivered
Okay.
already.
It was
Great.
delivered Friday, but you guys are closed.
No, I mean, I don't need a full scale set, but.
Again, it's probably down in Gail's office.
Okay, great. The next thing was, sort of on the same vein as, Chris's. I didn't see the view, how we would evaluate the view corridors and noise. I just didn't see any,
We're anticipating, providing materials during the presentation
okay,
on that. But we can try to do it in advance. We had a slideshow early on
mhm,
that included some of that.
In fact, I think if you just said, you
views,
will be presented in the public
right,
hearing,
Okay.
that would take care of it.
yeah. So we're trying to make sure that when we come to do this, that we don't forget it.
And so the index wants really to be it's a map, it's not a rationalization, or it's not why we think we've met the noise standard, it's where in this packet or
Well,
when we will address it.
It would be great to have both, because I'd love to have you address all of them, and then we can just decide whether or not we agree with you, instead of having to figure it
That
out.
was supposed to write.
Well, and it's fairly, I mean, we have a lot of latitude, but there are, there are,
We can do
there are
that.
standards here, and, so I thought that would be,
I guess, if I may, the application for the special permit doesn't sort of push you in that direction. It could be designed in a way that did that. And
Yeah,
also,
we're trying to figure out.
your filing requirements don't require a full-size set of the plans, just 11 by 17.
but they do require a plan that's got a scale of 1 to 40, which I guess is the scale. So,
Yeah, that's just relevant.
But obviously, we would have done all that.
yeah, that's fine. I just wanted
no,
to,
it's our fault, not yours.
yeah, we're trying to get these
We're learning,
regulations.
we're learning.
We're learning.
Well, we're happy to
Yeah.
be part of the learning process.
So the other two things was utilities. There is a utility layout here, but I didn't see kind of a narrative about utilities. Is there one, or a besides a site plan, like what are the
Other than
utilities?
The fact they're rewiring all of Cape Ann to make this work.
Well, that, yeah.
Not quite,
Um,
only part of Cape Ann.
And the geothermal, like a narrative, I think people will be, some sort of I couldn't figure out where, because maybe I didn't have strong enough glasses.
I
There's
saw
a
that.
specific narrative as
Yeah.
to, it's, the plan shows how we're laying it out to
Okay.
address the building and how we're supplying.
Okay, and, so I think people will, need to have a primer on that technology. My guess,
Oh, on the geothermal.
yeah, and it's a closed loop system and it goes down, 500 feet, and your GZA will probably address that, so.
Yeah, there'll be, I think a lot of this stuff's gonna come out in presentations.
Yep, that's
to
fine.
you.
Okay, the other thing is, I think in our conversations, in our site walk up there, you had said that you were gonna have solar. I'm not sure if it was rooftop
On the
or
garage.
standalone. So we do have a solar bylaw, section. So just wanna make sure as we go through the section 11, or, as of right, large scale groundwater over, I think it was 250 kW. So if you're over 250 kW, this would apply, and so we should just fold it into the review. And, yeah, I'm also interested in any demand management that you're doing on the utilities side to reduce peak demands in the region when we have them. I assume I know you're doing it on other sites, so. Load curtailment. Emergency generator.
We have very big emergency generators.
Oh, yeah, no, but when you're going, of course, you're having emergency generators, but are you using them for load curtailment? Or peak loads, because that's very important to the region.
We'll present that when we.
Yeah.
We will get back to the board and
Okay.
during
Yeah.
the presentation, we'll look at that.
And gas and utility capacity issues. Gas and electric capacity issues.
Gilbert, any comment?
So, I'm the most novice member of the planning board, but what and I did not get through everything also, but what I am interested in hearing about is sort of the schedule of the project from the beginning of construction and things like noise and blasting and hours, and, we have rules on that, but in order to be able to check against that, just to have sort of a general timeframe with the concerns surrounding construction, the vehicles, construction vehicles, that goes into the noise and other things, but I couldn't find that kind of thing, and maybe you're not required to give that to us, but I would be interested in that. And I know people who live near there are interested in that also.
Just, I have a question to Mr. Resnick first. When we do the permit, do we do a separate permit for each phase, or is it just one permit for both phases?
Well, we would do one permit generally is what you do, and then if there are specific conditions for a particular phase, you would note that, phase one conditions and these conditions would apply to phase two, kind of break it out. But generally it's one permit.
So schedule maybe.
That's what we were anticipating.
Okay, so.
Just to follow up on Ms. Philbrick's comment, our general bylaws do have quite late construction start hours, 8 AM. And I believe that you can, I can't get online, but I believe you can apply to the select board for a waiver on that. Construction industry does not like it, and it's challenging. So, and I do think the other issue, probably less of an issue for your site than the high school, but where the trucks are gonna stage, and traffic, so probably not a big issue for neighbors, but, as people are arriving and parking on the site and all of that, just the construction, and you've got plenty of space, so I think you're probably fine, but the hours of operation in the general bylaws, I believe, are 8 o'clock start. No construction before that, which is really late for most sites. So, that's
Well, thanks for alerting us to the fact that we can apply to the selectmen for it earlier.
double check the general bylaws, that's my recollection. But it's, especially if you're blasting, my guess is that might not be waivable. No, because you are blasting, I guess you could say. And we do have some blasting regulations, as well, that are in. They're not in, they were, the town meeting authorized us to write them, and that we did write them. So we should get those to you, Mark. We have, we can help you find them. If they're not on the website for some reason.
Okay, any other comments? Okay, the next thing on cell signaling was the, where we stand with consultants peer review.
Okay, after discussing, peer review consultant list with, our engineering and DPW, selected 3 to contact, which is Environmental Partners. I've used them in there quite a bit, and as do other communities for review. BSC Group, 10 years ago, I used them for a project, and Wesson and Sampson, which is a firm that does a lot of work here on the North Shore and is one of the town's engineers for some of our either water or maybe it's the sewer plant. So, so Environmental Partners has received the entire package. It's been forwarded to them. They are available. They will be submitting a kind of a cost estimate along with their hourly rates, and it'll be billed out based on the hours they expend. I've talked to Weston and Sampson. I need to talk to a different person, but they will be interested in the project. BSC hasn't responded to my outreach to them. So I'm not sure whether someone was on vacation or something, but I will follow up with them as well.
Which one of those has transportation, or they all 3 have expertise?
Yeah, they, as far as I know, all 3 have expertise in transportation.
So they would handle, we talk about civil, landscape,
Mhm.
environmental, traffic.
Yeah.
Geothermal. Laura,
We talked earlier about a wildlife biologist as on the team and possibly peer review. That's not gonna be in a firm like any of those. That would be a distinct specialty. Are we still thinking about that as a peer review?
There is a wildlife
Sport.
brief report.
This is biohabitat.
Right.
It's on-
Biohabitats, yeah.
Yeah.
I was wondering if we were going to have a peer review for that as well.
I think that you need to determine to what extent portions of the application require peer review. Some of them may not. You may not, for instance, need to take a hard look at the GZA report, that they have their stamp on it, they have status. These people may say that ought not to require peer review, or they may have less work to do and they may be trying to expand their responsibilities. But I think that there are some aspects of the project that sort of speak for themselves. And we've gone overboard in certain departments, especially the biohabitat area. So maybe that's not so necessary, but.
What do you say? What do you mean you've gone overboard on?
Well, where cell signaling is particularly interested in removing invasives, planting native species, making sure that wildlife isn't disturbed, but in fact promoted, all that kind of thing. And so right now we have a quarry that's in many respects devoid of all that stuff, and we're bringing it back. So if you think that it would be appropriate to look at the manner in which we're addressing these things, then we're not going to argue with you, but you may, on the basis of the presentation from the biohabitat people, when we have an opportunity. We're anticipating coming to a hearing and continued sections of the public hearing with people with specific expertise. We're not going to bring everybody on one night, but we'd be happy to say on April 14th, we're going to bring the biohabitat person. And if after hearing the report, you think that you need a second opinion about something, we don't want to rush it. But I think that they may make a convincing presentation.
Speaking of that, schedule. I sent just a draft schedule I did of possible dates for, public hearing and the continued public hearing. All the different topics, not in any order, but I put them all on that I think we need to have, peer review on. I talked to Gail, she's gonna post, the cricket on 223 and 3-1, the notice of a public hearing. And then on 311, we will open the public hearing on the special permit. And then I have several continuances. I've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, getting us to the end of May. And then June 3rd deliberating and on the application and writing decision, all very tentative based on, but that's sort of wanted to lay something out on paper. The fire, police, DPW, we talked, that they would have maybe an internal staff meeting, the town, and have comments, and then Mark would put the comments together in a report. They were also, are interested in attending the peer review hearings, speaking with police, fire, and DPW. So, that's where that stands. And then there was talk of an additional site walk. More with the, not so much for the planning board, but maybe for, some town people and maybe the public. So,
That'd be fine.
so we were thinking of.
Matt loves doing that.
You're bringing coffee this.
Mark, if it would be, if you're gonna have an internal, police, fire,
Yes.
DPW meeting, if it would be helpful to have, for
Oh, yeah.
instance, Matt's team here.
Okay.
If it makes it more of a productive working session, we're happy to do it. Sure.
I don't think a lawyer would help.
No, we'll keep you out.
You are.
I have a question, Ron, on the schedule. So you've got these different disciplines, traffic, and we talked about adding bike and ped there, civil and LA, and then environmental with peer reviewer. And I just wanted clarification. Do we mean environmental in terms of potential contaminants? Or do we mean environmental, like we were talking about a moment ago, in terms of ecology and habitat
Yeah, more or less on that ladder.
on the ladder?
But it can be on whatever we want to have a peer review on.
I think that sounds fine. It's just that the word environmental can be different things to different consultants.
I'm sorry, I can't get on my thing. Stormwater as one of, is
That was
that,
under civil.
okay, yeah.
And then a FinCom, we decided that they would, give us,
Input on the.
financials.
I've
So,
seen it, I just,
is there a particular order that makes sense that you would prefer to have in terms of hearing topics?
Not necessarily. I think that, those topics that might necessitate further peer review, the earlier we have that discussion with them, the better. Because if we talk to somebody in April about something that you then want to get a second opinion of, it'll elongate the, schedule. So, it's probably the civil stuff that,
the stormwater takes forever.
and
So I put traffic and civil
Yeah.
first, the first two.
Yeah.
Right.
So, just thinking that along those lines, I had geothermal last, FinCom second to last.
I think that's right.
Yeah. What, can I?
Yeah, and there may be, we may have to,
We'll juggle
Push it
based on
out
the selection and what, yeah.
right, because there will be some outstanding items that we'll have to address during some additional meetings.
Yeah, my experience with the high school was that the stormwater calcs had a lot of discussion and back and forth. I'm hoping that by having the presentation, then we can let our consultant deal with Hancock and work it out and report back to us that he or she is satisfied with any modifications. That's rather than trying to hash it out here with lay people. But that hopefully can work. That's one of the things I was gonna mention. Oh, I do have one question. This, there's an interesting recommendation in the MIPA report that for a signal, which I think will, probably cause as much discussion as anything. Is
Well,
that a, is that
well,
a
there
part,
was a
right?
roundabout also mentioned with the
Right.
bike and ped. I mean,
That, if I may,
Yeah, can you-
my recollection is that those items are to be considered at the end of phase one.
Yes, I saw that.
When we've been in operation or cell signaling's been in operation and about to embark on phase two. Because a
See what
lot
the
was
action-
speculative and they didn't know
Okay,
whether, and we anticipated that the town wouldn't be
up and
necessarily
down.
in favor of those suggestions.
so that goes back to my point, that we're making a
Right.
ruling on this permit based on phase 1 and 2.
Correct.
But
But-
we
but
won't
there-
have all the
There may
information.
be conditions that,
Right.
that could be imposed that would say, you know, at the end of phase one, we come back and we
address traffic.
review the results of the operation.
I think that's actually, that'll be a condition of our state highway.
Of your MIPA permit, okay, so we'll leave that to MIPA then, and some,
They're
probably,
doing that,
because
that's
they're
what
gonna,
That's what they're.
but does, now. Maybe we'll pay more attention to that next review than we did with their first review. No, I mean, I went to the sidewalk that they had and. There was, I didn't. You know, think about giving input on that issue at that. Sidewalk. But maybe we'll want to. Pay attention to that.
In reading that, it went back as far as Mill Street, some of the areas of concern.
That was, yeah,
And we just did something with the Cornerstone Church with their site. So I don't know if there should be any coordination or discussions with them, but we did ask for certain traffic mitigating considerations in their site.
Okay.
For the
Thanks.
law.
And our plans were drawn up in consideration of that project being in the works.
Okay,
So it was calculated in the calculation.
okay, great. Anything else for these gentlemen? Ford?
no, I thought it was a very complete package, all in all.
Yes, lots of data.
Well, your new performance provisions are comprehensive.
Yes,
That's the idea.
that's a compliment.
The big project.
Yeah.
Okay, I think we can move on to our next topic of interest, the MBTA communities.
And we'll get you the materials you requested.
Yeah, great.
Thank you, gentlemen.
Really good suggestion.
Looking forward to it's good problem. So could we get can the board get an update on, the A, what's been going on?
We're done.
Yeah,
Just
we're all
Good.
done. You haven't read the paper, obviously. Sure, we can give you an update. There is one thing we really need to talk about today, which is this zoning forum that we would have March 2nd. But leading up to that, I guess we can talk a little bit about where we are. So we've been modeling different possible districts just to see how the model works and to see if we're kind of anywhere near compliance with different little districts. And we've learned a lot. One of the things we tested, which is very interesting actually, was to see if we use the existing zoning in place in the general district and just said, if that were the district, how close would we be? And we actually did surprisingly well, except for density. The density was too low, but it was an interesting exercise that Sarah Melish wanted to explore.
Would you gonna approach the state on a density relief?
I have not done that yet. I'm doing that this week. I reached out to Emily to get some guidance on how to approach that, and I just got that response from her, so. To be determined, based on the Resilient Coast Initiative. Worth a shot, see what happens.
So here's the basic give and take that we're dealing with. We're trying to minimize the impact on the town, both on the character of the town and on the number of new residents that might come into the town. On, all the different aspects of this. Trying to make this as easy as possible. So what we found is that, there's some sort of division between districts outside the 1/2 mile radius and inside. So the more we can put things outside the 1/2 mile, the less impact there is on the downtown. However, there's something going against that, which is any district that has bigger lot sizes is going to accommodate bigger projects, obviously. So this is the balance we're trying to strike. So let's say, for example, hypothetically, we wanted to put 10 acres of the 37 that we have to do in the LCD. Every new unit we build in the LCD is a new unit. Whereas every unit capacity in the downtown is offset by the existing residences in the downtown. So it's a tricky kind of a thing to figure out exactly how to structure these districts to minimize the amount of impact it's going to have on the town altogether. The other thing we're going to try to do now is start applying our guiding principles to actual neighborhoods and then districts to try to, so we can say more or less objectively, we're ruling out this neighborhood because the lots are all too big, or it's prone to flooding, or some other constraint that's going to probably not get good approval from the town. Or one of our guiding principles is to make this something that the town meeting will approve. So that means trying to guess what people might really want to see when they get this package delivered to them for their action. So again, it's this balancing thing, but all of our guiding principles don't line up exactly right. So it's a give and take, and we're just going to struggle with it and get down to it as best we can.
Have you determined schedule now on?
Mark has a great
Mark
schedule.
has done that for us.
Yes,
So, but somehow we're gonna be involved at some point. planning
Yes.
board.
That's correct. So we, unfortunately, I don't have it with me, but the schedule basically is, we need to have a package submitted to the state for review by June 15th. So that way we get it back, on the 15th of, the later, hopefully, then the 15th of September, which gives us time to finalize versions, submit it to the Commonwealth, to the select board, have it come back to the planning board to post for public hearings for fall town meeting. So, and then working our way back, we have 2 or 3 joint meetings scheduled with the task force and the planning board, and then a few, like another end of February, all of March for the task force to put things together. Now, as far as the districts, we were, the areas that we were looking at rezoning were our next task force meeting. We were hoping to maybe not final every single line, but get a good sense of the areas so that we can begin drafting the text that is necessary for the 2 areas, whether it's the downtown area and an area outside of the downtown. Because you might have 2 separate,
2 options to the
Two.
board.
Oh, we're gonna have
No.
few.
several options to the board.
several options, but as far as the preferred option, I think you will get a preferred option, and then you will get, well, we could make some additional modifications, but these would be kind of the downsides, the rent. That's why Chris was talking about looking at each of the other areas as it relates to the goals. So the task force can explain to the planning board why they didn't recommend you know, it is an option, and some areas will be
Yeah.
completely like, no, we totally don't recommend that, but at least you'll have a few, you'll understand their thinking on why they're bringing forth something to you, and why the regulations may be written a certain way for the downtown, but maybe there's a whole completely separate set of regulations for the area by the highway. Where,
Sorry, go on.
so.
One thing I just wanted to add on the schedule, Ron, is the submission to the state is sort of what we're proposing. It doesn't mean that things can't change after it gets submitted. So I don't want you to think in your mind that, oh my gosh, everything has to be perfect when we send it off to the office.
Draft.
Well, yeah, I mean, a good draft, but we have time.
There'll be
to-
wiggle room. after
Right,
this.
and we have time to continue to engage with the public throughout that entire period when the state is reviewing it.
Will your consultants be present with the joint meeting with the
Yes,
planning board?
course,
That's
yes.
something you could ask.
Yeah,
her
no,
to do.
she's planning on doing it. So I want to keep going if I may.
Yes,
So that's one piece of this is what the districts are, and they're gonna be overlay districts. So they'll be superimposed over the existing zoning. We're probably gonna call them something like multifamily overlay districts. So if you want to propose a multi-family project development in one of these districts, this new set of zoning regulations will apply to those projects. But if you're just doing something else, like building a single family house, the underlying zoning will be what you'll follow. So we want to make that clear. A big piece of this is going to be, as part of these zoning regulations, design controls. And what we've learned is that some towns are pretty strict about mandatory design controls in terms of height, roof lines, window sizes. These are all things that don't really affect the economic feasibility of the project, and so we can make them mandatory. One of the ideas is it's mandatory that the architect designing these things has to submit a statement justifying why he's designing the building the way he is. One of the things that the design guidelines subcommittee has realized is that what makes this town special, and we say this over and over, is not that we all require gray shingles and white trim or white clapboards and black shutters. It's the variety of architecture and of streetscapes that makes this place charming. And the question is, how do you mandate variety? And that's gonna be something we're gonna have to struggle with to try to encourage development that fits into the existing variety of fabric that's in the town right now. So it's not simple, but we're making really good progress. The design guidelines group has come up with a character statement for the town that they're going to use to base the guidelines off of. And they're now starting to actually draft guidelines. I think they want to make a video that people can see about, they'll be demonstrating different, kinds of buildings and how they work and why people like them here. And again, it goes back to scale. One of the things that makes this town so attractive is the small scale of the buildings, and that's why we're gonna try to fit this into areas where there are small lots that only can accommodate small projects.
So back to March 2nd.
Yeah,
March 2nd. So one logistical piece on the zoning forum is Tiffany has been working to get some visual aids. One thing we requested was the ability, and it's going to be in the, I'm not sure the official name of the library room.
Media center, I think it's called.
Okay, so she's working to have a screen. And then also we want some sort of hard copies of zoning a map of each of the zoning districts, which people can see what their current zoning district is, and then we'll talk about what the rules are. And that the town does not really have those maps currently that include the designation of street names. It's just sort of this block of land, and it's hard to understand. So Tiffany has some pretty complicated maps, but they're actually gonna make things much easier to understand. But the price tag of all these visual aids is $1,800. And so the task force has a small budget, but we were going to see if we could talk about splitting the cost with the planning board. If not, Tiffany will go back to the drawing board. But, Mark can attest that we could actually use these maps for purposes other than MBTA zoning, because they're not currently available to us.
Yeah, I mean, it's available on the website. I mean, you can pull up the zoning on the GIS and you can zoom into any part of the community and find out what the zoning is. And I can produce maps if we have a plotter, we can bring maps to somewhere where they can print them for us. But again, it's just printing sections of I can print the entire map of the town and I can print sections, but I can't pull up different zoning districts and only print out that one zoning district. So again, it depends if you want, because if you look at the map, Ron, you have one in front
So I
of
brought
you.
this in,
Right.
clean out my desk, this is from 2000, and this is what this. This is
Okay.
2000, I just wanna show you how much
Wow.
it's changed, I mean,
Mhm.
I can pass this
Wow,
around.
that's interesting.
Here's the Sue Brown version of it.
And how much, how much better we got. 2000.
But this still doesn't have enough detail.
Right.
Now, if you do zoom into certain sections of the town, you can, all the streets come up, all the parcels come up, you can turn on and off parcel numbers. I mean, there's a lot of things you can do to play around with it. But again, it's, can't just do one zoning, you gotta like pull up a section, the west side of the town, the center, core section. Maybe you do two for the east side, seems like long and narrow, you maybe do a couple there. And you could, if you printed out full-size copies, you could see all the parcel lines, see all the streets. So again, you could do it that way in section.
Do you think, that it's, depends, I guess, how many people we have, whether or not we really need, them in hard copy for people. I mean, I think we definitely need some blow up, but I feel like a screen, like a big screen that people say, I'm at 25 Pine Street, and you type in 25 Pine Street on the
We can do
ArcGeo,
that,
that
right?
we can, that's
Yeah, we
kind
can
of,
Can do
do
that,
that with a
Right.
bunch of these.
right?
So you walk in and you say,
Right.
well, where do you live? And
right, you
oh,
get
you're in zone A.
A, right. I feel like that's, and that's as easy as, and if people forget, then they now know that it's electronic, which is kind of, there's so much that people can find out about their homes just in that GIS. You can find out floodplain, and you can find out, and that it's important that people know that in addition to the zoning. So I don't know, you guys, it sort of depends how many people we have.
Well, so we think it's gonna be very important to video it and post it, because then people can see this thing at their convenience.
Do you want to talk about your thought of how the event would take?
Yeah, so what we know, at the last meeting, we authorized a group of us to work together to make this happen, which I think we should probably have a meeting or two. Maybe at the end of this week to get started on it. But one of the ideas is to start with just a very quick overview of what zoning is. What the history of it is in Manchester, what the different zones are. And what the rules are for each zone, and then people could go up and talk about each of these zones separately of different stations, so that E people could be over here on a big table and the D people could be at a much smaller table.
There will be more D people there than E people, I guarantee.
And then Mark thinks, and I think he's right, that at the end of this, there should be something about the MBTA zoning. Because people are gonna be asking questions about it, and so we should be prepared to say something about how the MBTA zoning is going to relate to this existing situation that we're in. So we create the baseline and then say, this isn't final yet, but these are some of the ideas we're talking about.
Seems like a poster with your guide, with the guiding principles would be really helpful.
Yeah,
That's a good idea, Sarah.
So you see like a podium set up with somebody speaking and then
Maybe-
tables?
Maybe not a podium.
Maybe not a podium, that sounds kind of formal. I'd like to be as informal, kind of like the density walk was, you know, or the, this is just a gathering of people to discuss this stuff.
We've done this before. I do think that there's an advantage in encouraging people in the communications that they can drop in anytime during the
Yes.
2-hour window. And so
Yeah.
so that
Yeah,
that intro material could be said every half hour or, you know,
Or maybe as a pass out sheet.
Well, we could certainly have passed that.
yeah, it could also be said at a couple of junctures. During the, you know, as you get a sense that new people, most people come at the beginning. They don't actually believe that but it is nice to have people to be able to drop in for 10 minutes if that's all they have.
But you could also have like formal intro
Right.
at the beginning of the meeting, and then for the latecomers, you could have a separate table
Yeah.
where they come in, they get greeted,
Right.
and then you give them the same sort of spiel, and then you send them off to their neighborhood zoning district.
Thanks. I have a couple of comments. One, I agreed with what you said, Mark, in your recommendation to make it about the 40A process, not just about the existing zoning. And I would say that's what most people are interested in. So put that up front and make a brief presentation about it, or however long the presentation needs to be, and then do the kind of, find your own zone. And people can stick around if they want to do sort of that exercise, but I think people want information, and presenting some information at the beginning would be very helpful. And I commend you both for working on the task force. I know this is a ton of work. You said a couple of things that just sort of raised a flag for me that I wanted to ask you about. One was, you said there were some sort of no-go areas, and certainly, flooding would be one of those things. I don't know what other ones would be, but I think I heard that you would rule out doing this overlay in large lot areas of town and really focus it on the dense areas of town. And my question, maybe just to think about that differently in terms of, is that equitable? Because if we actually are trying to make it possible to build more housing, and we want to make it possible for people to live here in different kinds of housing, then it seems like, we should make it possible. Doesn't mean it has to go all in one type of district, but also it doesn't, not having the possibility of the overlay on larger lot areas doesn't preserve the character of the town, because there's nothing that says you can't take a large parcel and subdivide it and make it a whole 20 more single family housing, right? So I think we're trying to do something different
Oh,
there.
when I say larger parcel, I
Yeah,
mean like an acre. So in the MBTA zoning, an acre lot, you can have 15 units built on it in one
Right.
big building. So there's that choice, or can you have 15 houses scattered around on smaller lots in a different part of town?
yeah. I'm just saying that an acre is part of, what built the suburbs, people on 1 acre lots, and you're sort of continuing we can only have one house on a 1 acre lot, and that kind of. So I would just encourage you to think about, like, if guiding principles include, anti-sprawl, being equitable, building compactly to
You're,
respect a
you're
compact
absolutely right.
town.
You're absolutely right, but I don't think we have time to rezone the town. We just have to get into compliance as best we can.
And we
Get
have
it
to get
through-
it past a town meeting.
And we have to get it through
Yeah.
town meeting. There's a bigger fight, which we can have afterwards, but
Yeah.
So the other challenge of allowing, say, zone E to be divided in ANRs to small 6,000 square foot lots there, is that there's septic, they're on, septic. A lot of those loans are on septic, and we have poor soils and a lot of, so the septic issue kind of limits development, I think, in many of those, or a large building, the capacity.
Yeah, and
soil
I think some of
capacity.
those things are valid and we should just state them
So-
up front. Flood zone, either now or future, septic versus sewer, or, incapacity for sewer, those kinds of things. He
Right.
was dealing with that, right? It was on the news today.
Right.
But I just want to make sure we're excluding areas.
well, it's a very valid point.
Yeah.
So I have a similar question, similar but different question, and that is there a concern that we could incentivize or design, how do we, is it okay if, or do we want to avoid incentivizing, multi-million-dollar condo developments?
Again, that's not really what we've been asked to deal with. We're just trying to get compliance done by the end of the year.
I think people's view of, well, I listened to Jim and Marjorie, I was going someplace today, and they said, well, people are worried about, subsidized housing coming in. And the other one said, well, this is not about that. It's not necessarily requiring 100% affordable units or, so I think the flip is, is this, I guess that's one of my concerns, is that we could end up with, large large townhouse developments, that don't help affordability, big A, or lower cost housing, less expensive housing. So we're right now agnostic.
So the task force has taken the position that we would prefer that 20% of the units be required to be affordable.
Mhm.
We need to do a feasibility study to prove it, but we think we can get that pretty easily because the town of Danvers got theirs approved. So we figured Danvers is eligible, we should be too. Then the bigger question, which we haven't really gotten into yet, is do we provide incentives for more than 20% affordability? Would we allow extra density in a building that said they'd have, 30 or 40% affordability? And I'd like to see that, but that's just me. I can't speak for the task force on that.
But I still wonder if the market will build the opposite.
We
build-
can't-
May.
They
They
may.
may,
Yeah.
we can't control the market
Right.
with this.
But like the market is
Market's
building
gonna
or
do
not
what it's
building
gonna
here
do.
now, yeah.
Right, interesting. Because one of the things, I think that affordability is reasonable from compliance, you guys know on compliance, but for the senior housing, going back to that, we interviewed one developer who developed a lot of senior housing, and he said that developers now expect that they have to include affordable,
Yeah.
affordability, some portion of their units need to be affordable.
Yeah.
But that's a common expectation.
Well, we're not precluding the possibility of a developer coming in and getting a big tax credit award and building 100% affordable complex in town. I guess that's probably doable under 40B as well, but it could happen under MBTA zoning guidelines. But it wouldn't be a huge project because we're trying to put them into smaller lots.
Historic district is excluded from this, is that correct?
We're excluding it because we don't want the risk of having historic houses torn down and replaced with 3-family homes. So, but that's something we can talk about.
Great.
Okay, so back to March 2nd. What's the plan? Is there gonna be some kind of, who is this committee that's meeting on the March 2nd?
So it was you, Sue, were you in that? I was, and I think Mary.
And you haven't met yet,
No, we haven't met.
so we're not meeting for 2 more weeks, so it'd be kind of crunch time by then.
So next week is gonna be bad for me, but if we could meet this week, towards the end of this week, that would be good. So I don't, Sue, shall we? No, I don't. know.
I'll let you can figure
date?
it out.
All
You
right.
can figure it out.
Thank you so much.
Friday work.
Friday works good.
So I don't, we've been curious to take a poll as to how many board members are available on March 2nd. I know you're not, but everyone
I'm
else,
planning on it.
okay with that date?
Yep.
And then I'll need to quiz Mary and Christina.
I need to post it.
Post what?
March 2nd.
We're all over that.
There you go. Okay. I got it.
Hopefully the paper will say
We've
something.
learned a lot about posting.
Oh my
yeah.
God,
Oh, yeah.
10 minutes.
Okay. Anything else, on your, talk about the community forum? Anything else you want to mention? You getting full attendance at your meetings?
Yeah.
Oh, yes. The Manchester Club,
No, some of the men on the task force have been invited to the Manchester Club this Thursday to make a presentation.
Welcome, we'll welcome you.
We're here at Chicken Farm.
Yeah, well,
ask good
they'll
questions.
be,
Ron.
oh, you'll get a lot of questions.
Well, we're looking forward to it.
Okay, great. See you then.
Oh, when we thought, when Chris and I were talking, we should try to get the realtors, because realtors at home often, sometimes don't know about zoning.
They rarely know about something.
That's true.
It was suggested to me that when you get your tax bill, that it says on it what district you're in. Something that.
Is that right?
Town should do.
Oh, a suggestion, yeah.
Yeah.
Well,
Something that someone-
congratulations, you're
You're
an MBTA.
You made it.
Your house value just went up because now you can put 3 families there.
So, is Greg on? Yes.
Hi, Ron.
Oh, great. I wanted to just take up
Oh, it's on
the.
twice.
There's 2 of you. Wait.
Great. So, we had this topic, of the, town meetings coming up, planning board budget, and you sent, I forwarded to the board, your budget, information. So I'll open it up to you, Greg, first to explain, the process and what's been earmarked.
Sure, so it represents a couple of changes, but otherwise, most of the items are level funded. So on the on salaries line, the funds there is for the full-time planner plus what will be a full-time land use clerk, a clerk who will provide support to the planning board as well as to the zoning board of appeals, as well as to the building inspector. So the other funds for that position will be out of the building inspector's budget. The idea is to have one person providing service to all 3 of those entities so that there's continuity and there's someone always in the building to provide support for those 3 functions. So the thought there is that it'll provide better continuity and better information sharing and flow, that when permits are issued, then the person is working with the building inspector to make sure that all the conditions that were part of the permit are well informed for the building inspector. And that makes sure nothing is falling through the cracks. So that's the change in the salary line. It is an increase to allow for that better level of service. And then moving to the operating expenses, the other expenses, there's a change that the Finance Committee approved the other night. We started off with the sort of standard 5,000 in the professional services line, but then we also were proposing $20,000 in the capital budget for future planning studies related to zoning. But the Finance Committee feels that we might as well just put all that into the professional services line and not separate them out. So the professional services line would be for 25,000, which would be that standard 5,000 that we've always carried, plus the 20,000 for any needed consultant work on new zoning that you might work on, whether that be additional 3A work or floodplain or others that you may prioritize in the next fiscal year. So the total 154, just over 154,000. Like I say, in keeping with previous years, but obviously with that capital in there, increasing it, and then we do have that boost in the salary line. So that's a quick run through of the numbers.
Yeah, so if it's in the professional services box, and the planning board wanted to have some kind of help, would we need to, how would we go about that? Is that something that we could make a request for funding, or?
Yes, correct. You'd work with Mark and work that through.
Any questions, Sarah?
I think it's great to have the additional 20,000. I think we should be ready to speak to it at town meeting, but I think you're exactly right. The 3A work, the floodplain work, and some of the coastal resilience stuff is looming. My question, Greg, is I know Sue Brown had said she had kind of a slush fund and it rolled year to year if she didn't spend it. Are there other monies that are out there in Mark's pot of money to use, or is this is more of a curiosity question, or has that been sort of cleared out, put back in the general fund, and now this is what we have?
Well, there likely will be some dollars left over in the capital fund this year, which was for the 3A zoning. So that would carry forward if you need it.
But there's not a big carryover line item.
It just depends on how much you spend of that capital fund for this year.
The professional services, or is there a capital line?
There's a separate capital line this year.
And how much was that?
Originally a 30, I think it was 37.5.
And we haven't spent.
And I think you're talking about going forward with the financial analysis for the 20% versus the 10.
Yeah.
Okay, so that's
So
some of that.
that would take a little less than half of that, I believe.
Okay.
How do we stand on the budget with the consultant for the 48? Are we in good shape?
Isn't the,
Yes, that was basically a lump sum.
Right.
With the task force.
I missed the answer.
So yes, we're doing fine. That's a lump sum contract, so she's so we're tracking fine on that.
Even if she does attend our meeting. Good. Any other, Laura?
yeah, I'm really glad to see we've got a full-time planner on board, and we have a land use clerk who's gonna be full-time. I think those are very good assets to the town. My question is about actually writing zoning law, and I know we have some access to the town council. I think that's in a different budget item, but I find all of us trying to write zoning law is excruciating and not very productive. So I think it would be great to have access to, and I don't know, you know, if Mark knows how to do that, but I certainly don't. So having access to someone who is versed in zoning law and doesn't spend a lot of time just kind of pulling things out of thin air. I'm not saying we're not all smart, educated, well-intentioned people, but we don't have a deep familiarity with writing zoning law. So that would be a real help. And I'm wondering how we would get that help, as well as just kind of general questions to town council when something comes up.
Well, I can answer some of that.
Okay.
I don't know exactly what the town council budget is, but as far as drafting zoning bylaws
Yeah.
with this group, I mean, I think moving forward, and I've talked to some of you individually, and I'd like to talk to the rest of the board as well. But I mean, I can write and draft zoning bylaws, but I can only really work on one task at a time, given the multitude of things that I'm being involved in, from the MBTA to other boards. So I think we need to, if we set some priorities, we can begin to work through those. If there is a large, because we do have, it is being proposed that we have some additional funds, and we do have a large project, sometimes that's when you do bring in a consultant to work on a large project that they can focus on. And that some of the smaller rezoning things, edits to site plan review, edits to driveways, edits to certain zoning districts, are things that we can do amongst ourselves. Edits to some of the existing overlay districts might be things we can do ourselves, and then of course, almost always all zoning does get reviewed by town council to ensure that the legal framework, they don't generally comment on the intent of what you're trying to do and how you want to word it, but to make sure that you stay within the legal boundaries.
And those costs would come out of our general legal line item.
Okay. Could I ask a question and follow up? That's a helpful explanation, and it makes total sense to me that you are focused on, you know, what the what we deem to prioritize. I do think there are some things that are maybe going to grow in urgency around flood and water quality and, you know, climate resiliency. And so you may not have time to do all that.
Right, exactly.
So in that case, and we may not want to wait, you know, 3 years or something until we've got time to get around to it. We might need some outside help. So I don't know if I need an answer tonight, but I think it would be good to have those kinds of resources available when Mark gets busy doing other things that we've asked him to do. And yet we don't want to wait 3 years if we need to address, you know, flood zone, flood control or water quality or whatever the kind of critical issue might be.
I
We also have-
think that's what the additional
Professional
20
services.
professional services
Uh-huh.
intended to do.
Okay,
So that if we do feel that, you know, based on the past
Yeah.
storms,
right.
we can't wait
Right.
anymore, and we have to address
Right.
some flood
Aren't we
control.
sharing that with other boards though, the 25,000, or is that
No.
all,
No.
that's all the planning?
Fine.
Okay.
We also have access to MAPC's assistance too.
Mhm.
I mean, we have to pay for some of it, but it's usually subsidized. So if there's particular, like floodplain might be, the floodplain. So, okay, I agree with a lot of issues.
Chris Nolan.
So the one thing I'm concerned about is drafting the cell signaling permit
Mm.
approval. That's gonna be, that's a thesis. And I don't know how that's good, whether you're gonna have time to do that or whether you're expecting.
Permit Gillette Stadium. It's a little smaller than Gillette Stadium.
Yeah, I mean, again, depends.
Well, you put me
In the past, you know, we kind of focus more on the conditions and for the permitting of the various projects that the craft group proposed, because it was more than just the stadium, it was Patriot Place, and so you know, obviously there's quite a bit of time, and it does get reviewed by council as well. Whereas regular little site plan permit wouldn't be, but again, we can discuss that moving forward. For the,
I think this matrix that Mark is gonna
Mhm.
provide, may provide, you know, we could do, cross-check it against the bylaw and then say, you know, it
Mhm.
complies with parking,
Brilliant.
these conditions. and
right,
It's brilliant.
la-di-da. So,
Or put-
how long do you
those
think
are-
that process of writing it would take? Is that a week, a month?
couple weeks, really. I mean, and then bring it forth particularly to the board to review the conditions to make sure that, you know,
So,
because those are the most important part. I mean, you can write volumes about the discussions
Right.
and it's not absolutely necessary as long as you get the key elements in there and the key things, just in case something is appealed. I mean, you want to make sure that you have a concise, well-written document, but you really want to focus on the conditions.
So I see these parallel, the MBTA and cell
Mhm.
signaling are running down the same schedule, the more
Right.
MG, and it's really gonna bog us down this year. And, plus our additional applications.
We may have to have some additional meetings. I mean, I
Yeah,
think we're
was
gonna
gonna
have to,
Suggest that maybe, you know, maybe these joint meetings
should be off.
off.
Yeah.
We may have to find dates that are acceptable.
Yeah.
Don't wanna Go
I
crazy.
mean, I
but-
think sticking with Mondays is at the same time, it's our best bet, because other.
Select
What
board
did you
meeting.
say, any day but Monday?
Oh, no, I was saying, I wasn't thinking about the select board, but I was saying sticking with Mondays because we already kind of have that in our calendar is gonna be easier than going to another day of the week.
Well, we can meet the same night as the select board, there's
Mhm.
nothing that prevents us,
Right, we'll
Right.
just be in the
just
little
be in the
room,
other room,
the little room.
the little.
Okay, thanks. Any more questions for Greg on any, on the budget? Let him go.
Yeah.
Thanks,
you.
Greg.
Thanks, Greg.
You're welcome. Have a good night.
Okay, moving right along, liaison committees, task force, working group updates. Senior housing bylaw, any action?
I think we added it to the priority list.
You're welcome.
I think now, it's sort of on the back burner right now.
Harbor management, is anything?
Yeah, so we're gonna have a forum as well on March 19th at the high school. The purpose is to give people interested in the harbor issues opportunities to help direct the consultants' work. Again, a sort of a drop-in type of format with tables around the harbor, boating, safety. But the harbor is a broad area. It goes out 3 miles and it goes from Magnolia to Beverly.
What?
Well, that is the harbor management study area.
You can't get a more.
So there's
And
gonna be dogs on the beach.
right, but we are probably going to exclude the beach issues from the study because there are a lot of issues around the beach in terms of parking. We want to focus our consultants largely on the harbor, the main harbor. But so it includes all chapter 91 lands, which are basically the entire coast. And the things that affect it, which would be runoff and that kind of thing. So again, we're probably focusing most on the harbor, but we want in this meeting to be broad and give people an opportunity to express concerns or vision or ideas, broadly speaking, and then that will help to direct the consultants' work. I believe it's March 19th, and I know, I might argue, yeah, I did. I tried a different tack, but I was overrun. I was not in the majority.
Okay,
So-
thank you. Thank you, Sarah. CPC, we're meeting on Thursday. Hopefully, I'll get out in time to join you guys. But, we'll be finalizing projects for Springtown meeting. I attended a governance meeting, I sent you in your package some of the slides. We went over, the groups went over a process to do a project plan and its parts. Pretty interesting meeting. Everybody explained how, they didn't know that these groups existed and, how much every group depends on each other to move things along. They were also continuing to work and improve our website. So there is a governance link in our town if you want any more information. We also attended a wayfinding task force meeting with the downtown improvement. This is sponsored by the Downtown Improvement Committee. A consultant from MDI presented about 240 slides all over the world, how towns brand themselves with interesting bridges and the way they paint crosswalks and the way they design benches. Anyway, it was just an overview of possibilities. This is based on a grant. There's no construction money for anything that's decided at this point. But there's gonna be future meetings to come up with ideas for Manchester to have its own brand. What do we want to do for a brand?
The rotunda.
Oh, Rotunda's good. Do we want to have signs, consistent uniform signs, it's it's interesting. We'll see where that goes. They're gonna present whatever is decided to the select board. So stay tuned. There's 3 or 4 more meetings. I'll keep you briefed on those. Anyone else? Laura?
Yeah, Ron's request, this is now a couple of weeks ago, but my first chance to report on it. So I had helped 2 of the select board members, Becky and Kathy, to review the proposals for a grant administrator of the NOAA climate, sort of a group of climate studies that is happening for Cape Ann and Manchester, I gather, is the lead grant recipient of a collection of monies that's coming to all these different groups, including Harvard GSD, who's been doing the Cape Ann climate study and others. And so we reviewed 2 proposals, we interviewed both candidates, and we made a recommendation to Greg and the select board, and I believe they have selected a grant administrator now, but I did go through that process with them. Just focused on climate.
Anything on affordable housing or ZBA or any?
CBA is meeting next week.
Sarah, more?
On Thursday, I think it's Thursday, I think I sent this out to everybody, but at 9:30, MAPC is having a webinar about the governor's housing bill. A summary of that.
Oh, I missed that.
MAPC is, yeah.
An email? Okay,
Yeah.
just a second.
I may or may not have.
Can forward it to us?
Yep.
That'd be great.
And Greg sent you something about some meeting with the governor's group or some free meetings or something. If you can-
There are some webinars about how to draft zoning bylaws.
Yeah. I went to one of those.
Okay, anything else? Regular minutes, Gail informs me you didn't get a chance this weekend, so,
We have minutes from the 8th. January 8th.
with the January, Gail, are you still with us with the January 8th meeting in the packet?
I saw them on SharePoint.
I didn't see anything.
I didn't see.
No, it's right here in my Word folder.
Okay,
All right, well, we look forward to seeing them.
Were there any from the last meeting that we didn't approve?
No, you've approved everything. So you'll have January 8th and then second January meeting at the next meeting.
Great.
We're pretty current.
Thank you, Gail. Just in your handouts today, you've gotten a earth application for earth fill. We're gonna fill this area on Proctor Street, Smith Point Road, 19 Smith Point Road. Gail has jumped the gun and scheduled a site visit, for us on the 24th, that's Saturday at 9:30. It's at 19 Smith Point Road.
I'm going away.
Yeah, thank you.
Anybody can make that?
No.
That's 2 no's, 2
Three
absent,
no's, 4 no's.
3 no's.
We're on.
Yeah, we may have to postpone our site visit.
How can you do? Well, you need you need a site visit before you can hear the application.
Not necessarily, we could go afterwards and take a look at it, it might be even better if we present it.
Yeah.
So why don't we go with the presentation as scheduled for next meeting, and we'll work out a mutual date with board members and the applicant.
Okay,
How's that sound?
Good to me.
But to advertise, right, so,
the
Was that-
site visit isn't advertised. That's
Oh.
just an agenda item.
agenda, okay, great. Okay, anybody have anything else? We meet on the 26th. Mark, anything? No? Anyone else?
I move we
Motion to
adjourn.
adjourn, is there a second?
Second.
All those in favor? Thank you all.
Thank you.
Um,